right, we're doing a message tonight that, as I said, in Christian circles, this would not be allowed to be discussed. But anyhow, we're going to discuss that because we don't discuss what they do. And it's called Judas Was Not a Bad Guy After All. Or was he? You have to make the decision about that. You have to see in your own mind, you know, how the evidence lies. I mean, what you'd have to do is be a jury. So you pretend you're a jury and you reach a conclusion. Was he? Did he do wrong or not? His name even has a meaning in Webster's. I mean, when you're bad, that's really bad. When your name has a meaning in Webster's dictionary, you're bad. In other words, that would be like saying, Al. You look up the word Al, my God, you know, he's got a bad reputation. If you look up Webster's dictionary, yeah, I'm talking about you. If you look up in Webster's dictionary, the word Judas means traitor. That's what it says in Webster's dictionary. This guy, I mean, you talk about your name going down in history. How are you going to live that? And if you look up the word traitor, it says in Webster's dictionary, one who betrays under the guise of friendship. That's what a Judas is considered. And what we're going to look at Judas the man, which is interesting. But more importantly, we'll look at the Judas which is the part of you. Everybody has to have a Judas, because unless you have a Judas within you, you will not be able to be saved. You've got to have a Judas within you, or you'll never be able to be saved. Well, see, all of these names and all of these characters that you read about are actually simply symbolic words that describe parts of your personality. That's what the whole Bible's about. Symbolic words that describe parts of your personality. And Judas is a word that describes a part of your personality that is very important for you to have if you are to be, quote-unquote, saved in the true terminology of the word. But in the Bible, this guy is definitely the villain. He's the guy that comes in, you know, with the black hat and the black coat on, and, you know, and everybody hisses and boo, you know, and all of that stuff. I'm sure that even in the Passion plays, whenever Judas comes up, you know, he's always a seedy-looking guy. You know, have you ever been to any of those Passion plays where the crucifixion, and they always have Judas come? You can always tell it's him because he's a real, you know, crummy-looking guy. All the rest, Peter and Paul, you know, or James and John, they're all, you know, the Bible. But this guy comes in, and he's a real crummy-looking character, and that's our boy Judas. But in Luke 6:16, it says Judas Iscariot, the traitor. And in Matthew 10:4, it says Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So the Bible says he is the traitor who betrayed. Okay, but keep in mind now that without him in you, you will not escape from that which is the bondage of your own mind, so that you can rise up into Christhood. You've got to have him in you, or else you're not going to make it. And that's what basically the story's about. Otherwise, what's the sense of it? You know, it's a poor melodrama, you know, in a book you read about. It has no meaning. Does they have to set this guy up? I mean, is this what the whole deal was? That there has to be a God somewhere that picked this poor schmuck to set up to be the egghead of the world forever? I mean, what a deal this is. What choice did he have? So let's take a look at it, you know. The interesting thing about this guy is that he was given the most trustworthy position of all the disciples. This guy was the treasurer. He controlled the money. Okay, he was the treasurer. He controlled the money, which means that Jesus and the other disciples thought he was the most trustworthy person and could be depended on more than anybody else in the group. And I'm sure with Jesus being the head honcho, he approved and selected Judas as the most trustworthy person who would do what was in the interest of the group and in the interest of Jesus Christ. Don't let that get away from you. You know, because he was the treasurer. He's the guy that carried the money. He had control of it. And probably because he was the only one that had a brain in his head that could handle it. So he was probably not only the most intelligent, but the most trustworthy, and obviously selected by Jesus Christ himself. Don't let that one get away from you when you talk of the melodrama, the drama part of the story. But open up the Bible to page 103 in the New Testament. Go to the book of John. Okay? And if you go to the book of John and turn to John chapter 13. So we got this down pretty much. Judas is the traitor who betrayed Jesus, but he is also the treasurer of the group, which makes him an interesting character. But I want to outline some of the things in this little melodrama that are interesting, and let's take a look at it. But in John 13, go to verse 21. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, verily. That word verily means I'm telling you the truth. I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. So Jesus is talking to the 12. One of you. So he specifically looks right at them and says, I'm telling you, as we're gathered here, one of you shall betray me. Okay, that's great. And then in verse 25, they say, Lord, who is it? So that's the second question. Who is it that's going to do this? One of you is going to do it. Now you're sitting around the table with him. Say you're sitting around the table with Jesus, and he says, man, I got some really rank news here. This is going south, and I'm really going to get blown away. And the terrible part about this is that one of you guys is going to do this. So you all look at each other. And one guy leans over and says, who is it? Who is it? Now, look at verse 26. He it is. In other words, it's the guy to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. Okay? Fine. And when he dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. So, who is it? Jesus says, it's the one who I give, when I dip the sop, I give the sop. And he gives the sop to Judas. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Pretty clear as to what had happened. One of you is going to betray me. Who is it? It's the guy, when I dip the sop, I give the sop to, who is it? Judas. He gives the sop to Judas. Now, in verse 27, after the sop, Satan entered into him. Interesting. Not before. Not before. After. And that's very important. Satan was not in him. In other words, he didn't have this cornball idea before. Judas had no thought of doing this until Jesus gave him the sop. It says in there, after he got the sop, Satan entered. That means after this happened, he got the idea as what he was going to do. It wasn't a remotest thing in his mind before that. Remember that. And that's very, very important for you to see. It wasn't until after Jesus made his move, then Judas started conjuring up these ideas in his head. So who instigated the thing of Satan entering into Judas? Jesus. Because if Jesus hadn't given him the sop, according to the Bible, Satan wouldn't have entered into him. He would have had nothing to do with it. Okay? Wasn't before. And that's very, very important. So when you say Satan entered into him, it means confusion. All of a sudden, the ideas start entering into the lower mind of what I am to do. What should I do? Okay? And this is interesting. Jesus instigates this by giving him this little sop. When he gives him the sop, all of a sudden Judas gets this idea of what he's supposed to do. Now Jesus has got him, and what does Jesus say in the next verse, verse 27? Jesus said to him, what you're going to do quick. I don't want you wasting any time. I want this done now. I mean, he's giving him instructions. I mean, this is laid out. Here are your instructions. I want this done, and I want it done now. Get out of here and go do it. So, it wasn't that, you've got a plan and you're conjuring up this plan. It's when I push the button, one of you is going to react, and the only one whom I'm going to select is the one I can trust to do the job. And when that trusted one had been assigned the job, Jesus said, do it now. Do it quickly. Now this is the interesting part. Where did we start? One of you is going to betray me. Who is it, Lord? When I dip the sop, the one whom I give the sop to is the one who's going to betray me. Great, Lord. He gives it to Judas. Everybody looks at Judas. Judas, what you're going to do, get out of here and do it quickly. Take a look at this next line. This is a beaut, all right? Verse 28. No man at the table knew for what intent he had spoken. In other words, they didn't understand. They asked what was going on. They asked who was going to do it. He said, when I dip the bread in the gravy, I'm going to give it to the guy who's going to betray me. He gives it to Judas, and they said they don't know what the heck happened. They didn't understand. What kind of a cock the group is he hanging out with? These are the disciples. These are the big 12, you know. These are the hot, I mean, how dumb can you be? This is a portrayal of religion at its best. It was done in front of them. They didn't have the slightest idea what he was talking about. What's new? And this is the beautiful part. Look at 29. Some of them thought because Judas had the bag, that means the money, that Jesus had said unto him, buy those things that you have need of so that you can give something to the poor. Where did that come into here? Where in the world would they get the idea? He just got telling them, I'm going to dip the sop, I'm going to give it to the sap with the sop, and this is the guy that's going to be the sap that's going to take the sop that's going to screw up the whole thing. And what do they say? Oh, I thought you were giving him, he was going to get money for the poor. This is what you're dealing with. These are the saints of the church. These are the great disciples of Christendom whom you're following over every hill and dale, trying to find your salvation. What a dumb bunch. See, did you read it? Did you follow this? Even you knew what the heck he was talking about. They didn't know what he was talking about. They had no idea. So here then we have the most trusted guy who controls the funds, takes it upon himself to do the business. He's pointed out as the traitor. He said, here it is, and it goes right over their head. They don't have any idea. Here they're standing there, right? What did you see this? What happened? I don't know. What? He gave the sop? What? Where's he going? To feed the poor? What? He said somebody's going to betray him. I don't know from this. What, who? What does he mean? What? Who knows? Fakakta with this, let's go home. I don't know already. I'm sick of the whole thing. I don't want to be involved. What? Where did Judas go? He went out with the sop. He's the sap with the sop, and that's the end of that. So now what are we dealing with here? An absolute bunch of confusion of people who are told by Jesus Christ exactly what is going to happen and who totally pay no attention to it. Here you have the dawning of Christianity. Because you got some real winners here. These are the guys that are writing the book that you're following. Okay. And this is not only the book you're following, you're putting it under your arm and you're kissing it. And you're putting your hand on swearing oaths on this fakakta bunch that had no idea what the heck Jesus was talking about. And they're telling you what to do. And you go into the church, and this is the Bible. It's like, you know, they just investigated the heads of people. They investigated dead people's brains. They find out that homosexuals have a different brain circuitry than heterosexuals. And so they're coming up with the conclusion that homosexuals are born that way. What? Jerry Falwell was on television last night, said, me and the other Christians will not believe that. He should have been there at the sop because he's the sap with the sop. He should have been sitting there on the same thing. He didn't understand that. He'll never understand. He'll never, ever, ever, ever change from what he believes because his belief comes totally from man and from tradition. He had no idea what Jesus was talking about, no idea what God is talking about. Do you know something? There is not one mention anywhere in the Bible of Judas trying to make a name for himself or being a selfish man. In fact, I'll show you something. Go to page 21 in the book of Matthew in the New Testament. Page 21, the book of Matthew. And go to Matthew chapter 20. Okay. Matthew chapter 20 and verse 20. You with me? Okay. And then came to Jesus, the mother of Zebedee's children with their sons worshiping him and desiring a certain thing of him. In other words, they want a favor. The mother wants a favor. Okay. Mother's coming for a favor. And he said, what do you want? And she says, listen, grant me my two sons may sit on your right hand and on the left hand in your kingdom. These two guys are wheeling and dealing. Who's trying to get something out of this? Not Judas. Where's Judas? He's doing the business. He's down doing the business with the work. He's down at the bank. He's banking the money. He's making arrangements. He's making the getting the travel arrangements. He's doing all the stuff. These guys are trying to wheel their way in, so they send Mama down there. I don't know what to say. Well, she said, why don't you ask him? You could sit at his right, the kingdom. This is going to be a big thing, you know. What are you doing all the work? I don't know what to say, Mama, because he doesn't listen. He gets mad and all this stuff. I'll go down already. She goes down and she's telling him this. Listen, I want Jacob to sit here. I want John over here. He's going to sit there. We're going to have a great time with the bar mitzvah. The whole thing. There goes it. I'm getting in a good mood because I have to go to work tomorrow. And so what happens? She goes. So these guys, wouldn't these be the kind of guys you would think? These were the guys that would sell you out? Sure, these are the guys that would say. The other guy's working. He's doing the work. Now go back to John. Page 103. John chapter 13. It is great. You know, you can really get into this. You can look what you're doing here in the basement here. You are revolutionizing this story. Nobody has ever in the history of your brain ever told you this before. And it's a revolutionary approach to the story. And yet everything in there, you sat through the drama just a minute ago, through this bunch sitting in there. You saw Jesus specifically say how he was going to identify the guy, and you saw that his band of cutthroats hadn't the slightest idea what the heck he was talking about. You saw it with your own eyes. And you just saw James and John were the two guys that were trying to wheel and deal for themselves. Now listen, I want to show you something. John chapter 13, page 103 in your little Bible. John chapter 13, verse 26, where we were before. Look what Jesus says. Who is it that's gone? It is the one whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. So let's take a look at that, dipping the sop. You know, you do it all the time. You don't use that word, but you know, you got a little gravy, you dip the bread in the gravy, you dip a roll in the gravy. That was called dipping the sop. The bread, once it had consumed the gravy, is called sop. So now you know. Jesus points out, it is the one to whom I shall give the sop. Now look what it says there. Verse 27. When, after the sop entered him, no, it's verse 26. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas. And he says, what you do quickly. Now let me ask you a question. You're the jury here, right? You're the jury. Why didn't Jesus simply say, when they said, who is it, why didn't he point out and says, it's Joe? When they said, who did it, why didn't he say, you see the young fellow there in the green shirt, Al? It's him. What is it with the sop, the sap, the dip, the sop, the gravy? Why do you have to go through theatrics in order to identify somebody? Didn't want. Okay. He didn't want to waste food. He should be with the 12. We'd follow him. He'd be the next saint. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But I ask you this because you're supposed to think of this. You right away should see something. Wait a minute here. He could have went right up and said, see, sitting right there, that's the one with the white shirt on. Yeah, see how guilty you got? All of a sudden you put your hand down. You had to. Why didn't he simply say that? Why didn't he say, look, you want to know who it is? It's Judas. He didn't do that. He says, I'm going to dip the sop, and the sop, when I give it to that person, he's the one. Here's the thing. And here's the thing that nobody, Jerry Falwell, Billy Graham, whoever, nobody has ever mentioned this. Nobody in the history of your Bibles, nobody in the history of television has ever mentioned this. Why did Jesus dip the sop? Let's look. Let's take a look at Webster. Because you get a Webster's dictionary, you hear that are in the audience, you hear that are on television, get a Webster's dictionary and look it up. Sop, a piece of food dipped in a liquid. Okay, we know that. Piece of food dipped in a liquid, no problem with that. But there's another meaning. Okay, here it is. A conciliatory or propitiatory, what is that? Propitiatory, well, bribe. Propitiatory. How would you pronounce that? Propitiatory. Let's call it that. Propitiatory bribe. Or a gift. So what dipping the sop means is a conciliatory or propitiatory bribe or gift. Can't pronounce that word. Let's go a little further with this. Let's take these two words, conciliatory, and look it over. Conciliatory means to win over. To win over. To agree. Interesting. Propitiatory, whatever that is, means, get this one, to gain favor. That's what dipping the sop means. See? In other words, when you dip the sop, the tradition was when you dip the sop, you hand it to somebody, you're trying to win that person over to what you want done, and you are trying to gain favor with that person so that person will do what you want done. Okay, now what about a bribe? We should look at the word bribe, because that's important too here. And Webster says a bribe is something given to a person in a position of trust to influence his behavior. Ha-ha. A person in trust to influence. So dipping the sop, according to Webster, means that when a person was given that in a traditional sense, that person was the object of being won over to a particular way of thinking, to do a favor for somebody, and he was then being singled out as a person who could be trusted, who was being influenced to do something because he was the one there that would do it. He was the one who would carry it out. That's what dipping the sop means. Look it up in Webster's dictionary when you go home. Look up the word S-O-P. Not S-O-B, S-O-P. And you'll see that. But that's very, very important for you if you're going to read the Bible. And I dare say many of you, or not many of you here, but some of you, or maybe one or two, have gone to Bible studies, have gone to Bible schools, and have never even stopped to look up what that means. He dipped the sop. No idea that that's what's going on here. There is a deep drama happening here. And it is between Jesus and Judas. And Jesus is looking around at these characters, but there was one person that could carry out this drama, and one person that he could dip the sop to win over, to do what had to be done, to gain favor with that person, and to influence somebody who he could trust to do the job, and it was Judas. In other words, dip the sop wouldn't be in the Bible. Dip the sop is in the Bible because you're supposed to find out why he did it. And all of your Bible scholars and all of your evangelists have never explained to you why he did it. Never once did they ever point out to you why he did it. And I'm telling you tonight why he did it. And if you want to confirm it, you don't have to go to a holy book, you don't have to go to a church, you go home and you pick up Webster's dictionary and you look at it. And Judas certainly was the guy who was in a position of trust and influence. And I'll tell you something right now. Judas Iscariot's behavior to betray Jesus Christ was designed and influenced by Jesus because he would not have done it otherwise. Wouldn't have done it otherwise. And as you start to follow this drama, you'll follow along till you begin to understand what the Jesus aspect in you will do to bribe and influence the Judas aspect in you to betray you so that you will be finally set free from the flesh to rise up into that which is the holy place. This whole drama takes place in your head. Judas understood that he was being instructed by the master to do something and do it quickly. Do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? If the death of Jesus Christ was the salvation of mankind, do you know that you talk about a guy getting a bad rap? Do you know that it was Judas Iscariot who was entrusted by Jesus Christ with the act of saving mankind and saving Jesus from his own flesh? He took the sop. He was asked for a favor. Can you understand that? It was Judas who was entrusted by Jesus Christ to perform one of the greatest dramas ever acted out in the history of mankind. And what have we understood about it? It's the same thing that we did with claustrum coming from the brain, from the North Pole, the North Magnetic Pole. We dressed it up in a white suit, have it, red suit, has it coming down a chimney with bags over its shoulder. Completely misunderstood what this was all about. Remember in Luke 23:34, what did Jesus Christ say? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. Do you know he's still saying it? Somebody forgive them. They don't have the slightest idea what I was talking about, they haven't the slightest idea what they're doing. Do you now, we talked about that this morning for just a minute, but do you realize that in the claustrum comes the gift of life from the center of the brain, and that the ancient people called it the Holy Claustrum? It became the Holy Claus, the Saint Claus, and then Santa Claus. Do you realize that the two aspects of your being are electromagnetic fields, pineal pituitary, which are poles on like a battery, a north pole and a south pole, a positive and a negative, and that's why Santa Claus comes from the north pole, the higher part of the brain. And do you realize that we made a story of some big fat buffoon with a red suit on coming down a chimney to give you bicycles? And the thing is, you go to church, and even in the churches they have this monster sitting down there scaring the blazes out of little kids, and this is your holy tradition. In our cable system, once a year we have kids come to see Santa Claus. People line up for 4 hours, and they finally get their little kid there, and the kid is the only one that has any sense. He screams at this monster, get away. But we force them. Oh, he's not ready this year for Santa. We have to brainwash him for another year. So really warp his little God-given mind, and by next year, he'll appreciate the monstrosity that we have made. He'll become as one of us. We got to work on him and change his little God-given mind into a bent, warped, twisted mind like we have. Then he'll be one of us, you see. And so next year, sure enough, this little monster crawls on the lap of the big monster. And now he's been thoroughly conditioned by us. And he doesn't scream anymore. In fact, he says, I want this, and I want that, and I want that, and I want that. And his mother says, isn't he cute? We have accomplished what we set out to do. We have twisted his little mind from recognizing evil into considering it good. That's a fact. But you know, when you talk about this Judas fellow and Pontius Pilate and all these guys, how did they know? The people that killed him, how did they know that they were all tools? They were all instruments playing out their role in this destiny, in this great universal cosmic drama. How would they know? They had to do it. This is all part of the thing. And it's not only the Jesus. You can take it back to Osiris. You can take it back to Krishna. You can take it back to all the gods. All the gods were born of a virgin. All the gods were crucified. All the gods were in the tomb. All the gods came out of the tomb. All the gods went up the thing. Because it's the cycle of life. The trees in this part of the country are about ready for the sacrifice. And pretty soon they will yield up themselves and return themselves back to the earth from whence they came, and give all the appearances of death until the great cycle effect takes part. And on December 25th, the sun is born to rise back up to consume the burnt offering. And when he sits at the right hand of power, new life will come to the trees, but they are now prepared for the cyclic sacrifice. That's what it is. That's what it is. And it's beautiful. The only part about it is they get mad because they want it to be like they say it is. See? So they can control you. But why wasn't Peter chosen for this job? I mean, Judas. I mean, Jesus called Peter Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You twerp. Get out of here. What was this guy doing? He was down here telling some little broad, yeah, I don't know him, but hey, I don't know from this guy nothing. What? What are you telling me? What? Didn't I see you with him? Me? You think I'd hang around with this guy? This guy's a revolutionary, rabble-rouser. What? He's Albie Hoffman. I don't hang around. I'm a conservative. I voted for Barry Goldwater. I don't know from this guy for cock or nothing. I don't know. That's what's Peter. I'm telling you, this is what happened. It happens in your book. Little girls coming up to him and saying, didn't we see you? Not me. Do you think I would hang around with that? Why not Thomas? There was another guy, totally weak. I'm not believing nothing. I didn't see it. I don't want to hear from this. No, it's a lot of fakakdalai. What? Who told you this? Some woman. I don't want to hear this. Pull there. What's this? Who are you? What? What are you bleeding? What's this with your hands and everything? What? Period. Why not pick this guy? There was only one guy in that mob that wrote all of these Bible stories. Is the one guy he could trust is the guy that never wrote a Bible story. Did you hear what I said? Write that one down. I'm telling you. Thank you. The one guy he could trust is the guy who never wrote a Bible story. Even I was laughing at that one. Write that one down, John. Jones got that on our little top hits. That ought to go over. But Judas was chosen for the job the same reason that Saul was chosen to be Paul. He was trustworthy and he was tough. He wasn't weak. He could finish the job. He could do the job. But say there was a thing here. If you look at the story and you look at analyzing Judas, he misunderstood Jesus' kingdom in the same way that Christians misunderstood. Judas believed what Christianity believes, and that was that Jesus was going to set up a kingdom on the earth. That's the basis of Christianity, and that's what Judas believed. He said, and this is exactly what he believed, that Jesus was assigning him to go and betray him to the system so that Jesus then could exercise his power to overthrow the system. And then Jesus would set up his kingdom on earth. Get this done quickly. And Judas said to himself, wow, he picked me, man. This is it. This is it. I go out, I do this, and he gets surrounded, pulls some of this hot magic of his, man, and we take over the world. System, your time is over. This is a new age. Huh? You talk about the gang of 8 in Russia. This was the gang of 12. And here was Judas. Wow, Jesus is going to take over. At the end of these guys, we're going to throw them all out. All right, I'm on my way. Well, guess what happened? We had a malfunction. And right in the middle of our message about Judas wasn't a bad guy after all. So we had to come back to the studio to finish up this message for you. But, you know, it gives me an opportunity to do something. And a lot of you folks that are around along the network haven't seen Prissy in a long time, unless you've seen some of the, you know, those A, B, C, and D tapes. But other than that, you don't get a chance to see the old girl. She's put on so much weight. Priss, there's a bunch of people on the network. Do you want to say hello? Yes. You glad to see everybody? What do you think of Frank? Well, anyhow, but you know, there's a lot of. No, wait. There's a lot of people out here who haven't seen you for a long time. She's not in the mood today, folks. But she just, Prissy sends her love. There you go. Send your love. But we were doing the program about Judas, and something went wrong with the tape machine. So I said, well, we have to get back to the studio and continue it. And so let's just pick up from there, okay? And then there'll be another program on after this one. And I just appreciate having you on the network and putting up with this. But let's get back to that point where we were, where Judas believed really what Christians believe today. In other words, that Jesus was going to set up a physical kingdom on the earth. And, you know, he says, hey, let me go do it. You know, I'm picked out to do this. This is a big deal. But you say, well, you know, where would he get off of thinking such a thing? Well, if you remember in the Bible, that thought also entered into Jesus' head. If you look in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 8, what does it say there? Matthew chapter 4, verse 8. It said, and the devil takes him up into an exceeding high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Well, what that's saying to you is that the devil taking him up to a high mountain means his ego got the best of him. He was thinking he was a big shot. So that's what that's trying to tell you. And he thought of all the kingdoms of the world. In other words, his mind started focusing on what he could get. His mind started focusing on, hey, wait a minute, I don't really need this. You know, I can do better on the outside than I can on the inside. And so he had at one time, according to scriptures and according to the story, had some ideas of a material kingdom. So it wasn't out of line that Judas might have thought that. So Judas obviously thought that he was helping Jesus to put into motion this power that would overthrow the law, you know, the government, and set up his physical kingdom on earth. And you know, you can't blame Judas for that. simply because it's exactly what all the Christians believe today. They never think of a spiritual kingdom. They don't understand that Jesus was talking about a spiritual kingdom, not a physical kingdom, see? But what Judas figured was this would force Jesus' hand. And I mean, Jesus had set this all up with the pass and the sop and all this business, that Jesus had set all of this up so that he could demonstrate his power and set up his kingdom on the earth. Now, remember the 30 pieces of silver. That's a small amount. Actually, what that represents is the 30 degrees in the constellation Scorpio. But we'll talk to you about that another time. But that's what that is. That's zodiacal. The 30 pieces of silver comes out of Zechariah, and it symbolizes the 30 degrees in the constellation Scorpio. So Judas wound up then totally misunderstanding Jesus' purpose. And his plan failed, even though he thought that he had Jesus' permission. This guy really took a bum rap, you know. But did his plan fail? How else could the great demonstration be fulfilled in this story unless someone or something inside of you plays the role to betray the flesh and set you free? There's got to be something that pushes you over the brink, that says, I'm turning off to this, and I'm giving myself up. I'm sacrificing myself so I can raise myself out of this existence and up into the higher realms. And you can sometimes go back into the book of Genesis. In Genesis 45, do you remember the story of Joseph and the amazing colored coat and all of this kind of business? Well, Joseph talked to his brothers that had sold him into slavery. Remember? Oh, there was about 10 brothers, and they dumped him, and they thought they were really getting rid of him. Well, they came back and apologized because now Joseph is a big shot. And they're coming back trying to get a deal out of Joseph. And they come back and they apologize. Oh, we're sorry that we sold you into slavery. But in Genesis 45:8, it says, it was not you that sent me, but God. In other words, Joseph says, you may have intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. In other words, nature intervened in this thing. So, I mean, surely Judas misread this thing about the kingdom. He totally misunderstood it. But if you read in Matthew 27:5, you'll find that Judas came back, took the 30 pieces of silver, threw it back, and hung himself. Now, that hardly sounds like a guy who was a traitor. I mean, this guy was really broken by the mere thought that, oh, brother, did I screw this up? I thought, you know, he didn't know that according to the divine plan acting out in this myth, he didn't know that he was the principal mover of universal salvation. He had no idea that. All he figured, he was a traitor. And, of course, Christianity has treated the guy as a traitor, which, of course, he wasn't at all. Say. And it certainly doesn't sound like a traitor would kill himself because what he wanted to have happen happened for, you know, $30. So remember, as you think of this poor soul Judas, that he was playing his part in this cosmic drama, and he played out the part that Jesus ordained for him when in that fateful night Jesus dipped the sop. You see? So you remember Jesus said, I laid down my life. Nobody can take it from me. So everyone had to play their part. And there's an interesting thing to think of. Jesus knew exactly where Judas was going, didn't he? He didn't try to stop him. He didn't try to. I mean, there was 11 other guys plus Jesus there. They certainly could have stopped him. Jesus didn't tell him, oh, stop that guy. He's going to betray me. Jesus had told him what to do, and hurry, do it quickly. And when Judas walked out the door, nobody tried to stop him. Jesus didn't try to stop him. And what's being told here symbolically, and always look at this mystically, don't look at it literally, is that the desire nature, the ego nature, that which is absorbed with the material life is not to be destroyed. There is no God that's going to intervene and break your will or anybody else's will. It must destroy itself. That's why the sacrifice of Judas to commit suicide. See, it's got to destroy itself. The self-destruction must take place before the soul can move into eternal life. In other words, you must dip the sop. If we want to get back to the early part of this message, you must bribe the flesh. Betray me and I will die, and then both of us will live eternally. And you do that by how? Taking yourself into a position of separation from the flesh Okay? Allowing the flesh then to turn on you so that you die. In other words, you and the flesh will no longer be acting in harmony. You die to the flesh. And when that betrayal, that sacrifice takes place, you're then prepared to raise yourself up to the higher realms. When Jesus, the flesh, was crucified, Judas, the ego, killed itself. And both were set free. Do you understand that? Forget Jesus, forget Judas, forget the flesh. Think of you. The Jesus part of you is betrayed by the Judas part of you. The flesh will no longer, it misunderstands totally what's going on here. See? And so the flesh will no longer have a communion, so to speak, with the spirit, with the soul, and you're set free. And by that, both then live eternally. And I don't mean the flesh, the physical flesh lives eternally. I mean that which is the lower instincts, because they will be renewed. So try to understand Judas in yourself. See how important the Judas nature is in you. Give it permission to betray you, just as Jesus did. Say, go and do what you do quickly. So the system will kill you from them and set you free to God. And the system will, but I'm telling you, as soon as you move on bringing yourself together with that inner realm, as soon as you move to sacrifice your ego in meditation, the system will destroy you. The system will accommodate you. They'll crucify you. Because they'll call you a cult, they'll call you a bum, they'll call you all kinds of words, and they'll kick you out from amongst their precious, sanctified few. And you'll be set free to raise yourself up. So, as we've seen in this message, and I'm sorry it was interrupted, but as we see in this message, Judas wasn't a bad guy after all. Okay? Christian